Mojang recently announced that armor trims will be coming to Minecraft 1.20. This is an awesome feature that will allow players to wear unique armor and show off their style. Unfortunately, they also changed how you get netherite. It now requires a smithing template for every piece that you want to upgrade. So, before it becomes even harder to obtain, I want to get fully stacked with netherite. And since I'm going to be spending a lot of time in the nether anyway, I'd also like to make a few nether farms that will improve my quality of life. I'd also like to take on the end dragon and get my first pair of elytra since I haven't done that yet. So grab some fire resistance potions because this is the nether episode. I grabbed some TNT and headed to the nether. I only had a few, so I wasn't very hopeful that I would get any ancient debris. I lit the TNT and actually found a few ancient debris, but it definitely wasn't enough to craft a full suit of netherite armor. I dug around for a while longer, not using TNT, but just digging along the chunk borders. I heard this was a decent method, so I tried it out. I did get quite a few debris, but I figured it would still be easier to use TNT. But I would need a lot more gunpowder. I crafted a pair of netherite boots and marked out a spot for the creeper farm. The build went by quickly and I AFK'd at it to see the rates. I was getting zombies and skeletons, so I probably missed a few trapdoors, but I'm fine with getting a few extra drops. After 20 minutes of AFKing, I came back to a ton of gunpowder, and returned to the nether with a little over a stack of TNT. I placed a bunch down and lit the fuse, destroying a huge area. I ran back through the tunnel to collect my ancient debris. I got 13 in total, which would allow me to upgrade my leggings, helmet, and chestplate. Only 10 days in and I'm already fully suited up. However, I would still need more if I wanted to upgrade my tools as well. TNT also requires a ton of sand, so I set up a portal in the nether to make my trips to the desert way quicker. I returned to the nether with more TNT, once again digging tunnels and blowing them up. I got 12 more debris, which I used to upgrade my hoe for the memes, my axe, and my shovel. Typically, I would also upgrade my silk touch pick. However, I decided against it this time to make it easier to tell the difference between my silk touch pick and my fortune pick. Now fully stacked with netherite armor, I was feeling pretty cocky. I went to the nether fortress to test my strength against some wither skeletons. I forgot to bring food though, so I quickly fled. The next major milestone I wanted to accomplish in this episode was to take on the end dragon. Before I could do that, however, I wanted to be as prepared as possible. I wanted potions. Most potions require nether wart though, and I hadn't come across any yet. I ventured out into the nether to see if I could find a fortress that actually had nether wart. I found another fortress, but just my luck, no nether wart. There was another fortress close by, and fortunately it had nether wart. I stopped by a nearby warped forest and killed some endermen. If I'm going to the end, I'm gonna need ender pearls. I managed to get 2 wither skulls, one right after the other. I have the strangest luck. I returned home and crafted some ender eyes as well as 2 ender chests. I brewed some potions of slow falling and potions of healing. I prepared my inventory for the journey that lay ahead. I used the ender eye and it pointed me to the west. I grabbed a boat because it's mostly ocean in that direction. I continued following the eyes. I dug down where I thought the stronghold was, but the eyes misled me. I found where the stronghold actually was and began exploring. It didn't take me long to find the portal. I filled the frame, and jumped in. I was pretty nervous for this fight. The last time I fought the end dragon, it didn't go too well. I didn't die, but I was out of food for most of the fight. I took out the pillars, and began the real fight. I was able to stay on this pillar for most of the fight, so overall it wasn't too difficult. I got in close, dealing a considerable amount of damage. But I got kicked into the air. Fortunately, I had a feather falling potion on hand. Finally though, I landed the final blow. I grabbed the dragon egg, but my time in the end was not done yet. I wanted to get an elytra right away. I turned up my render distance but didn't see any cities nearby. I chose a random direction and eventually found one, and it had a ship to boot. I pillared up to the ship and got my first elytra. I wanted to get a few shulker boxes as well, so I killed a few shulkers. I raided the city and got some pretty good loot. I returned home, satisfied with the spoils I had gotten. I put up a new display in the achievement hall, listing the date the end dragon was defeated, day 218. I put mending and unbreaking on my new elytra. I AFK'd at the creeper farm for a while to get more gunpowder for rockets. The next step after getting an elytra is to make sure you have a sustainable supply of rockets. Up to this point, I hadn't actually made a sugarcane farm yet. I was getting by on the sugarcane that grew near the river. So I looked up tutorials. I knew I wanted to make something large scale and cool looking. I found a design by Il Mango that used flying machines to harvest the sugarcane. I found a spot within the spawn chunks to build it. Flying machines are a bit fickle if they aren't always loaded, so I wanted it to be close by. I flattened out a pretty large area for the farm. This farm doesn't have a block by block tutorial. Rather, I had to download a world file and make a schematic. I started by placing down all of the coarse dirt. I placed leaves down and waterlogged them. I planted the first few rows of sugarcane, making sure that the sugarcane had time to grow and be replanted by the time I finished the farm itself, and got started collecting various bits of redstone. I needed some more redstone, so I went caving for the first time in a while. I also needed a bit of glass, so I gathered a shulker of sand. Finally though, I was ready to start on the sugarcane farm. The second half is way more complicated, so I'll just do a time lapse. The flying machines were a bit stubborn, and I had to rebuild them a few times, but it was finally done and ready for the first test. I crafted as many rockets as I could and filled a shulker box with them. I spent a bit of time repairing my gear and went on a bit of an expedition north. I found a frozen ocean which had a sunken ship. I followed the map and got some treasure. Next, I wanted to start on the Nether hub. However, my Nether portal wasn't where I wanted it, so I got started building an island between my starter island and the mainland. This would act as a sort of hub between the nearby landmasses. I needed to make a few bridges. I experimented with different designs, but landed on this Japanese-inspired design made with mangrove. I built a second one between the island and the mainland. I placed the Nether portal in this little grove area. I gathered more obsidian and used it to build a new Nether portal. I used 2 layers of obsidian to make the portal seem rounded. I needed warped wood to finish the portal, so I lit it and went in. My horse was in here, strangely enough. I finished the design of the portal. I wanted it to look like an ancient portal that had been there for thousands of years. I rebuilt the portal in the Nether closer to the Nether roof. This would help keep me protected from guests, as well as allow me easier access to the Nether roof itself. I dug around for a while, looking for a piece of bedrock that was positioned at exactly the right place, so I could glitch myself onto the roof. This part is always terrifying. If I did this wrong, I could end up trapped on the roof. Fortunately though, I was able to break the bedrock on the first try. I decided to take a break from working on the Nether hub. Now that I was able to access the Nether roof, there was one major farm that would upgrade my quality of life immensely. A gold farm. I spent the next few days gathering a few shulker boxes of magma blocks. This process was pretty long and painful. I thought it was going to take too long though, so I started on a new farm, a blaze farm. You can use blaze powder and slime to make magma cream, which can then be used to make magma blocks. I already had a massive supply of slime, so I figured making a blaze farm would be a good idea. Days 246 through 250 were spent building the blaze farm. I spent most of those days on fire. I finished the collection system and gave it a quick test. It was slower than I expected, but it did give me quite a few blaze rods. However, it still wasn't enough for the amount of time it would take to collect the blaze rods versus running around the Nether collecting magma blocks. So I went back to that method instead. While I'm running around collecting magma blocks, make sure you like the video and subscribe if you haven't. If you want to go one step further, consider becoming a channel member. You can help support me and the channel directly. You'll also get access to additional perks, like watching new videos a few days early, exclusive member badges and emotes, and more. Click the link in the description or press the join button next to the subscribe button to learn more. Thanks in advance, and now, back to the video. I gathered magma blocks for the next 4 days, finally collecting enough for the gold farm. I was leaving the Nether when this happened. One last thing I wanted to do before starting the gold farm was to gather more shulker boxes. I only had a few, and a project this large required a lot more, so I went to the end and gathered more shells. I gathered the last few bits that I would need to make the gold farm, and finally got started. I used Ilmango's gold farm design, though I followed Hoppercraft's tutorial for it. Placing the minecarts was the scariest part of this entire project. If I would have accidentally fallen into the killing chamber, I would have lost the world in an instant. With the gold farm done, I decided to test it. I AFK'd for 20 minutes and ended up with 41 blocks of gold, an absolutely insane amount for that short of an AFK time. Next, I wanted to finish decorating the nether hub. I used mini HUD to mark out a cylindrical shape and cleared out the netherrack. I used blackstone, warped wood, and sea lanterns as the main building blocks. Overall, I think it turned out great. I needed more obsidian for my portal, so I figured I'd start tearing down one of the end's obsidian pillars. I designed the portal in the nether to look exactly like the one in the overworld, though because I was so close to the bedrock ceiling, a few blocks are misplaced. My eyes were starting to hurt from spending so much time in the nether, so I returned to the overworld to do some chores around the base. The next major project on the to-do list was a wither skeleton farm. Most people make wither skeleton farms for infinite beacons. I wanted to make one for infinite coal. Having a reliable source of fuel is super important for long-term survival, so I gathered some turtle eggs and some other materials that would be useful for this farm. I'm using ENXO4's super simple wither skeleton farm design. I returned to the nether and found a decent place for the farm. The closest fortress to me was mostly in a soul sand valley, which is key for making this farm work. I think I mentioned how lucky this was in the first 100 days video. And finally, it's paying off. Day 275, I completed the farm and tested it out. After 20 minutes of AFKing, I had almost 2.5 stacks of coal, 8 stacks of bone blocks, and 33 wither skulls. I decided that since I now have a ton of wither skulls, I might as well attempt to fight the wither, right? I readied myself and spawned the first wither. The fight was over very quickly. I may have been too prepared for this fight. I got my first nether star and crafted my first beacon. I had a ton of iron from my iron farm, so I just went for a full beacon. It shone bright upon my island. I added a new entry to my museum displaying my accomplishment of beating the first wither. But the museum was starting to look a little weird, being out in the open with no real building around it, so I went into creative and came up with several designs. By far though, this was my favorite design. I added a small office building on top, and it really tied everything together. I spent some time putting the displays up again, and finished decorating the outside. I moved the beacon underneath the glass, which colored the beam green, which I kinda liked. Next, I worked on some smaller projects such as cleaning up the water next to the dock and digging some tunnels in the Nether to the end portal and to the desert. Speaking of the end, I spawned some withers underneath the bedrock portal. This is the fastest and easiest way to get a ton of Nether stars. After that, I was able to craft 10 beacons. I decided to place a few beacons around the island. I wanted complete coverage of every single beacon effect everywhere on my island, but I would need 6 beacons for each location, so for now I only made the full effect near my storage, and would come back later to finish this off. This was also a huge deal for me, as I have never had every beacon effect in a vanilla survival world. Zooming around at the speed of sound felt so good, and I was able to jump on top of most of my buildings. I wanted to spend some more time beautifying my starter island, so I decorated something that I had been meaning to decorate since day one, my mine. Usually my mines are just an ugly staircase that lead all the way down to bedrock, but I wanted to do something really special for it. I decorated the inside with cobble and tuff and andesite, and added a water drop to bedrock and a bubble vader to get back up. It was a bit tricky as I decided to dig down straight into a pool of lava, but with a few fire resist potions I was able to make it down safely. I only had a few days left in this challenge, so I wanted to make one last farm. This is one of the most overpowered farms in the game, a piglin bartering farm. You can get so many different types of items just from trading piglin's gold, so setting up a bartering farm is super worth it. I finished the farm itself, but I still needed some residents to fill it. I built a platform in a nearby nether waste biome. This would allow piglins to spawn if I flew up high enough. I got my first piglin and carted him into the farm. This process took a lot longer than I thought it would, as zombified piglins were spawning more often than regular piglins. Eventually though, I was able to get all of my new friends into their designated spots. I finally popped my first totem of Undying. It wasn't while fighting the End Dragon or the Wither, it wasn't even fighting a Hoglin. It popped when I landed slightly too hard on some scaffolding. What an embarrassing way to almost die. I had to redo the gold distribution system as it wasn't quite working very well, but once I did, the farm was working really well. I was getting more items than I knew what to do with. I got my first soul speed book and immediately tried to put it on my leggings, but then I remembered that it's actually a boot enchantment and I had it mixed up with Swift Sneak. I spent a bit more time in the museum, decorating it and displaying some of my first items, like my first set of iron armor and my first sword and other bits of armor. I also decided to make a map of the starter island and displayed it in the museum. I spent more time in the museum, but there are too many details to tell in a video. If you want to explore it for yourself, you can become a channel member and get access to the world download. The last few days were spent tidying things up on the island and getting it ready for the world download. I replaced the path with a mud brick one, which I thought looked a lot nicer and matched the theme of the island a lot more. Day 299 rolled around, and I took a break from building to appreciate all the progress I had made in this episode. I had now conquered the Nether by building a ton of farms, beaten the End Dragon and the Wither, and crafted a ton of beacons. As the sun rose into day 300, a new goal popped into my mind. Now that I had conquered the Nether, next I would need to conquer the End. But you're gonna have to tune into the next 100 days in order to see me conquer the End. With that, thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you next time. Peace.